You walk into a room and conversations seem to die down. Colleagues find excuses to end interactions quickly, and social invitations mysteriously stop coming your way. Every networking event becomes a painful reminder that while others effortlessly build connections and influence, you're left wondering why people seem to pull away from you despite your best intentions. I am Dale Carnegie, and I spent my entire life studying the art of human relations, teaching millions how to win friends and influence people through genuine connection. What I discovered about why people are drawn to some individuals while avoiding others will transform how you interact with everyone around you, giving you the social magnetism that makes people seek your company instead of avoiding it. The same principles that help countless students overcome social rejection and build meaningful relationships can work for you in today's world of digital communication and workplace dynamics. But first, like this video, subscribe for more timeless wisdom on human relations, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready to become irresistibly likable. Let me take you back to a moment that changed everything for me, a moment when I was 12 years old. Standing in the corner of my school's social hall, watching other children laugh and play while I remained completely invisible. I can still feel the weight of that isolation, the burning shame of being the boy nobody wanted to talk to. I wasn't always the man who taught millions how to win friends and influence people. In fact, I was quite the opposite. Growing up on a Missouri farm, I was painfully shy, awkward, and desperately lonely. My childhood diary, which I've kept all these years, contains a particularly painful entry from that school's social event. I wrote, "They all seem to know some secret about talking and laughing together. I stand here watching, wanting so desperately to join in, but I don't know how. When I try to speak, my words come out wrong, and they look at me strangely before turning away." That entry captures the agony of my early years, the constant feeling of being on the outside looking in. I would rehearse conversations in my head for hours, imagining clever things to say, only to freeze up when the moment came. I developed elaborate strategies to avoid social situations entirely. I would take longer routes to class to avoid groups of students, eat lunch alone by choice rather than risk rejection, and make excuses to skip social gatherings. The worst part wasn't just being ignored. It was the active avoidance I encountered. I remember trying to join a group of boys discussing baseball. I had studied the statistics, memorized player names, prepared my contributions, but when I approached and began speaking, I watched their faces change. One by one, they found reasons to leave. "I have to get home," one said. "My mother's calling," said another. Within minutes, I stood alone again, my carefully prepared baseball facts dying in my throat. This pattern repeated itself countless times throughout my youth. I began to believe there was something fundamentally wrong with me, some invisible mark that warned others to stay away. I became obsessed with understanding what I was doing wrong. I would lie awake at night, replaying every interaction, analyzing every failed attempt at connection. My breakthrough came during my senior year of high school, when I was forced to give a speech in front of the entire class. I was terrified, but something remarkable happened. For the first time, people listened to me, really listened. They laughed at my jokes, nodded at my points, and afterwards, several classmates approached me with genuine interest. That night, I wrote in my diary, "Today, for the first time in my life, I felt like people actually wanted to hear what I had to say." That experience planted a seed that would grow into my life's work. I began to understand that the problem wasn't that I was inherently unlikable, it was that I had never learned the skills of human connection. Just as I had learned to milk cows and plant corn on our farm, I could learn to connect with people. But unlike farming, no one had ever taught me these essential life skills. I started observing successful people more carefully. I noticed how they spoke, how they listened, how they made others feel. I began experimenting with different approaches in my own interactions. Some failed miserably, but others worked beautifully. Slowly, I began to see patterns, certain behaviors that consistently drew people in, and others that just as consistently pushed them away. My transformation wasn't overnight. There were many more failures, many more nights of lonely reflection, but gradually I began to crack the code of human relations. I discovered that the very struggles that had caused me so much pain had given me something invaluably deep understanding of what it feels like to be rejected, ignored, and avoided. This empathy became the foundation of everything I would later teach. By the time I reached college, I had transformed from the invisible farm boy into someone people actually sought out. I became president of my debating society, started making friends easily, and found that people genuinely enjoyed my company. The boy who once stood alone in corners was now drawing crowds to hear him speak. But I never forgot those early years of isolation and rejection. They taught me that the pain of being avoided is one of the deepest hurts a human being can experience. They also taught me that this pain is completely unnecessary, that with the right knowledge and skills, anyone can become the kind of person others are drawn to rather than pushed away from. This personal journey of transformation became my life's mission. Every principle I would later teach was born from my own struggle to connect with others. Every technique I developed was tested first on myself, refined through countless interactions, and proven through the dramatic change in how people responded. To me, after years of studying human behavior and teaching thousands of students, I can tell you there is one mistake that repels people faster than any other. It's so common that nearly everyone makes it, yet so devastating that it can destroy relationships before they even begin. I call it the me first mistake, and I learned about it the hard way through my own painful experiences. Early in my teaching career, I was invited to a dinner party with several prominent business leaders. I was thrilled at the opportunity to network and make important connections. I prepared ostensibly, researching each attendee's accomplishments and memorizing fascinating stories about my own work. I was ready to impress. The evening began well enough. I found myself in conversation with a successful banker, and I launched into what I thought was a captivating account of my teaching methods. I explained my theories, shared my successes, and described my innovative approaches. I noticed his smile becoming more strained as I continued, but I pressed on, convinced that my expertise was fascinating. After about 10 minutes of my monologue, he excused himself to get a drink and never returned to our conversation. Throughout the rest of the evening, I watched him engage animatedly with others while clearly avoiding me. I had committed the fatal mistake, had made the conversation entirely about myself. This mistake manifests in countless ways, and I've documented every variation I've encountered. Some people dominate conversations with their own stories, never pausing to ask about others. They respond to every comment with "that reminds me of the time I," or something similar happened to me when. They turn every topic back to their own experiences, accomplishments, or opinions. Others make this mistake more subtly. They ask questions, but only as a setup for their own responses. They listen just long enough to find an opening to share their own thoughts. They give advice when empathy was needed, or they compete with others' experiences rather than simply appreciating them. I remember one student who couldn't understand why his colleagues avoided him at work. He was intelligent, capable, and well-meaning. During our session, he demonstrated his usual conversation style by telling me about a challenging project, his innovative solution, his successful presentation, and his boss's praisal without asking a single question about me or showing any interest in my experiences. The psychological impact of this mistake is profound. When someone makes every conversation about themselves, they send a clear message: I am more important than you. My experiences matter more than yours. My time is more valuable than yours. Even when this isn't their intention, this is exactly how it feels to be on the receiving end. People respond to this treatment by withdrawing. They may not consciously realize what's happening, but they feel diminished and unimportant in your presence. They begin to associate you with feelings of being overlooked and undervalued. Over time, they develop an instinctive desire to avoid these uncomfortable feelings by avoiding you. The irony is that people who make this mistake are often trying to impress others and build connections. They believe that by showcasing their accomplishments, sharing their wisdom, or demonstrating their expertise, they'll become more attractive to others. But the opposite occurs. The more they focus on promoting themselves, the more they repel the very people they're trying to attract. I learned this lesson through careful observation and painful experience. Good intentions aren't enough to overcome this fundamental error. You can be brilliant, successful, and genuinely caring, but if you consistently make conversations about yourself, people will avoid you. They won't necessarily dislike you. Simply find reasons to interact with others who make them feel more valued and important. The solution isn't to become passive, or to never share about yourself. It's to recognize that genuine connection requires balance, reciprocity, and most importantly, a sincere interest in others that goes beyond what they can do for you. My mother taught me one of the most important lessons about human relations when I was just 16 years old, though I didn't fully understand its significance until decades later. She handed me her antique hand, mirrored the same one her mother had given her hand, asked me to describe what I saw. "I see myself," I replied, thinking it was obvious. "But what do you really see?" she pressed. "How do others see you when they look at you?" That simple question introduced me to what I now call the mirror principle of human relations. People reflect back to us the energy, attitude, and intention we project toward them. If we approach others with suspicion, they become suspicious. If we approach them with indifference, they become indifferent. If we approach them with genuine warmth and interest, they mirror that warmth back to us. This principle became crystal clear to me during my early days of teaching public speaking. I had two students who seemed remarkably similar. Both were successful businessmen, both were articulate, and both claimed to want better relationships with their colleagues. Yet their experiences were drastically different. The first student, Robert, constantly complained that people were unfriendly and standoffish. He described his workplace as cold and political, full of people who only cared about themselves. When I observed him interacting with others, I noticed something telling. He approached every conversation with his arms crossed, spoke in a flat tone, and rarely made eye contact. His body language and energy communicated distrust and disinterest. Before he even spoke, the second student, William, described his workplace as warm and collaborative. He felt supported by colleagues and enjoyed rich professional relationships. When I watched him interact, I saw him lean in when others spoke, maintain warm eye contact, and express genuine enthusiasm for others' ideas. People naturally gravitated toward him, sharing information freely and inviting him to important meetings. The remarkable thing was that these two men worked in the same industry, dealt with similar challenges, and interacted with similar types of people. The difference wasn't in their circumstances, it was in the energy they projected, which was then reflected back to them. I began to understand that we're often completely blind to our own repelling behaviors because we're focused on what we're thinking and feeling rather than what we're projecting. We might think we're being friendly while our tone says otherwise. We might believe we're being interested while our distracted glances communicate indifference. This blindness creates a vicious cycle. When people respond negatively to our unconscious signals, we assume the problem is with them. We think they're unfriendly, difficult, or simply don't like us. This assumption makes us project even more defensive or negative energy, which creates an even more negative response. I learned to help my students break this cycle by developing what I called social self-awareness. I taught them to pay attention not just to what they intended to communicate, but to what they were actually projecting through their tone, body language, facial expressions, and energy. One particularly powerful exercise involved having students record themselves in conversations and then analyze their own behavior. Most were shocked to discover the disconnect between their intentions and their actual projection. One student said, "I thought I was being friendly and engaged, but I can see that I looked bored and distracted. No wonder people kept conversations short with me." The mirror principle teaches us that if we want to change how people respond to us, we must first change what we're reflecting to them. If you want people to be interested in you, project genuine interest in them. If you want people to trust you, project trustworthiness through your actions and energy. If you want people to enjoy your company, project the enjoyment you feel in theirs. This isn't about being fake or manipulative, it's about becoming conscious of the energy you naturally project and learning to align it with your genuine intentions. When your inner state and outer projection are in harmony, people feel that authenticity and are naturally drawn to it. Asterisk, in all my years of studying human nature, I have discovered that there is one hunger more powerful than the need for food, more driving than the need for shelter, and more universal than any other human desire. It's a hunger that, when fed, creates instant connection and loyalty. When ignored, it causes people to withdraw and avoid us entirely. I'm talking about the hunger to feel important, to know that our lives, our thoughts, and our contributions matter. This revelation came to me through a letter I received from one of my students, a young woman named Sarah, who worked as a secretary in a large corporation. She wrote, "Mr. Carnegie, I've been invisible my entire life. I come to work every day, do my job well, and go home to an empty apartment. No one asks my opinion, no one seems to notice my efforts, and no one treats me like I matter. I'm beginning to wonder if I even exist." Her letter broke my heart because I recognized my younger self in her words. But more importantly, it crystallized something I had been observing for years. People will do almost anything for someone who makes them feel genuinely important and valued. This hunger for importance manifests differently in different people, but it exists in everyone. The executive wants to feel that his decisions matter. The janitor wants to feel that his work is appreciated. The child wants to feel that her ideas are worth hearing. The elderly person wants to feel that his life experiences have value. We all want to feel significant in some way. Most people, however, spend their time trying to feel important themselves rather than making others feel important. They talk about their own accomplishments, share their own opinions, and focus on their own needs. They're so busy trying to fill their own hunger for importance that they ignore the same hunger in everyone around them. I learned to flip this approach entirely. Instead of trying to impress others with my importance, I began focusing on recognizing and acknowledging theirs. The results were immediate and dramatic. People who had previously been polite but distant suddenly became warm and engaging. Colleagues who had been competitive became collaborative. Students who had been reluctant participants became enthusiastic contributors. One of my most memorable experiences with this principle occurred during a business dinner with a prominent industrialist. Instead of trying to impress him with my credentials or accomplishments, I spent the entire evening asking about his work, his challenges, and his insights into the industry. I listened intently to his responses and asked thoughtful follow-up questions that showed I valued his expertise. By the end of the evening, he told me it was one of the most enjoyable conversations he'd had in years. He began referring business to me and inviting me to exclusive events, yet I had said very little about myself. I had simply fed his hunger to feel important and valued for his knowledge and experience. The key to feeding this hunger authentically is to find something genuinely admirable or interesting about the other person and focus on that. Everyone has something worth appreciating: a skill they've developed, an experience they've had, a perspective they bring, or simply their inherent worth as a human being. When you consistently make others feel important, you become associated, in their minds, with positive feelings about themselves. They begin to seek your company because being around you makes them feel good about who they are. You become someone they want to spend time with rather than someone they avoid. This principle transforms not just individual relationships, but entire social dynamics. When you enter a room focused on making others feel important rather than trying to feel important yourself, you become a magnet for positive interactions. People gravitate toward those who make them feel valued and significant. The beautiful irony is that by making others feel important, you become genuinely important to them. By feeding their hunger for significance, you satisfy your own need to matter in a much more meaningful and lasting way. I once created a detailed chart tracking successful versus failed conversations, and what I discovered shocked me. The conversations that created genuine connection followed completely different patterns than those that pushed people away. Most people unknowingly use conversation techniques that build invisible barriers between themselves and others, wondering why their interactions feel strained and uncomfortable. The first conversation killer I identified is what I call interrogation mode. These are people who fire questions, rapid fire, without any genuine curiosity behind them. They ask, "How was your weekend?" but start planning their own response before you finish answering. They treat conversation like a checklist to complete rather than an opportunity to connect. I watched this pattern destroy a potential friendship between two of my students. James would ask Mary about her work, her family, her hobbies, all appropriate questions, but his eyes would glaze over during her responses, and he'd immediately jump to the next question when she finished. Mary later told me she felt like she was being interviewed for a job she didn't want. Despite James's good intentions, his mechanical approach made her feel like a task to be completed rather than a person to be understood. The second killer is competitive conversation, the compulsive need to match or exceed every story shared with you. When someone mentions they had a difficult day, these people respond with how their day was even worse. When someone shares an accomplishment, they immediately share a bigger one. They think they're relating and building rapport, but they're actually diminishing the other person's experience. I remember one evening when a colleague shared his excitement about his son's graduation from college. Another person at the table immediately launched into a story about his daughter's graduation from Harvard, complete with details about her honors and job prospects. The original speaker's face fell, and he withdrew from the conversation entirely. What should have been a moment of shared joy became a competition that left everyone feeling uncomfortable. The third conversation killer is solution mode, jumping immediately to advice and fixes when someone shares a problem or concern. When a friend mentions feeling overwhelmed at work, these people instantly offer strategies, and step-by-step solutions. They mean well, but they miss the fact that most people share problems because they want to feel heard and understood, not because they want unsolicited advice. I learned this lesson personally when my neighbor's wife mentioned feeling exhausted from caring for her sick mother. Instead of acknowledging her feelings, I immediately suggested hiring help, meal services, and medical resources. She politely thanked me but never brought up personal topics with me again. Later, I realized she had simply wanted someone to recognize how difficult her situation was, not someone to fix it for her. The fourth killer is one-upping the habit of responding to everything with a bigger, better, or more dramatic version. These conversations become unspoken competitions where each person tries to top the previous story. The result is that nobody feels heard because everyone is too busy preparing their next impressive response. Perhaps the most insidious conversation killer is what I call distracted engagement. These are people who seem to be listening, but are clearly thinking about something else. They nod at appropriate moments and make appropriate sounds, but their minds are elsewhere. People can sense this distraction immediately, and it makes them feel unimportant and dismissed. The antidote to these conversation killers is surprisingly simple. Approach each conversation with genuine curiosity about the other person's experience. Ask questions because you truly want to know the answers. Listen to understand rather than to respond. Show that you value what they're sharing by asking thoughtful follow-up questions that demonstrate you've been paying attention. When someone shares something with you, resist the urge to immediately relate it to your own experience. Instead, explore their experience more deeply. Ask how they felt, what they learned, or what it meant to them. Show through your attention and questions that their thoughts and experiences matter to you. Asterisk, there is a disease spreading through our society that kills relationships faster than any other social ailment. I call it the deadly disease of self-absorption, and I've watched it destroy countless potential friendships, partnerships, and connections. The most tragic part is that those infected with this disease are often completely unaware they have it. Early in my career, I developed what I called an ego thermometer, a simple way to measure how much someone talks about themselves versus showing genuine interest in others. What I discovered alarmed me. The majority of people spend 80% of their conversation time focused on themselves, their experiences, their opinions, and their needs, while dedicating only 20% to learning about others. I learned about this disease firsthand through my own behavior. During my transformation from socially awkward farm boy to confident speaker, I went through a phase where I became intoxicated with my own growing success. I had finally found my voice, people were listening to me, and I was making progress in my career. But this newfound confidence created a dangerous side effect. Became obsessed with talking about myself. I remember a dinner party where I dominated conversations with stories about my teaching methods, my students' successes, and my growing reputation. I shared my opinions on every topic, offered unsolicited advice, and generally made myself the center of every discussion. At the time, I thought I was being engaging and interesting. In reality, I was suffocating everyone around me with my self-absorption. Wake-up call came when a trusted friend pulled me aside and said, "Dale, you've become someone people avoid. You used to be genuinely interested in others, but now every conversation becomes about you. People feel invisible when they talk to you." His words hit me like a physical blow because I realized he was absolutely right. Self-absorption manifests in many subtle ways that people don't recognize in themselves. Some people constantly redirect conversations back to their own experiences. They respond to every story with "that reminds me of the time I or something similar happened to me when ... They're not intentionally trying to steal attention. They genuinely believe they're relating and building connection. But the effect is that they make every conversation about themselves. Others show self-absorption through their listening habits. They listen only long enough to find an opening to share their own thoughts. They're not processing what the other person is saying. They're waiting for their turn to speak. Their minds are busy formulating responses instead of truly understanding what's being shared with them. Perhaps the most damaging form of self-absorption is the need to be right in every conversation. These people turn discussions into debates, corrections into competitions, and sharing into one-upmanship. They can't simply listen to someone's perspective without feeling compelled to educate, correct, or improve upon it. I've observed that self-absorbed people often justify their behavior by believing they're being helpful. They think their advice is valuable Their experiences are relevant, and their opinions are needed. They don't realize that most people aren't looking for solutions or comparisons. They're looking for understanding and connection. The antidote to self-absorption is developing what I call generous curiosity, a genuine fascination with other people's thoughts, experiences, and perspectives. This means asking questions not as a setup for your own responses, but because you truly want to understand how others see the world. I had to retrain myself to notice when conversations became unbalanced. I started keeping mental track of how much I spoke versus how much I listened. I practiced asking follow-up questions instead of sharing related stories. I learned to bite my tongue when I felt the urge to offer unsolicited advice or corrections. The transformation was remarkable. As I became less self-absorbed and more genuinely interested in others, people began seeking my company again. They started sharing more openly with me, asking for my advice when they actually wanted it, and inviting me to social gatherings. By focusing less on myself, I ironically became more interesting and valuable to others. I keep what I call a criticism graveyard, a collection of stories about relationships that died because someone felt compelled to criticize, correct, or judge another person. These stories serve as a sobering reminder that criticism, no matter how well-intentioned, pushes people away faster than almost any other behavior. The criticism trap is particularly insidious because it often comes from a place of caring. People criticize their spouse's driving because they want them to be safe. They correct their colleague's presentation because they want the team to succeed. They point out their friends' mistakes because they want to help them improve. But regardless of the intention, criticism creates an immediate defensive response that builds walls instead of bridges. I learned this lesson through one of the most painful experiences of my early teaching career. I had a student named Margaret who was making consistent progress but still had some obvious areas for improvement. During one of our sessions, I felt it was my duty to point out these flaws so she could address them. I carefully explained what she was doing wrong, offered specific corrections, and provided detailed guidance on how to improve. Margaret listened politely, thanked me for the feedback, and never returned to my classes. When I later learned that she had enrolled with a different instructor, I was devastated. I had given her valuable, accurate feedback that could have helped her immensely, but I had also made her feel criticized and inadequate, which drove her away entirely. This experience taught me that being right isn't worth losing the relationship. Even when criticism is accurate and well-intentioned, it often does more harm than good because it triggers the human ego's protective mechanisms. When people feel criticized, they don't think about whether the feedback is valid. They think about defending themselves and avoiding future criticism from that source. The criticism trap manifests in many forms. Some people are direct critics who openly point out flaws, mistakes, and areas for improvement. Others are subtle critics who use phrases like, "Don't you think it would be better if ... or you might want to consider ... These approaches may seem gentler, but they still communicate judgment and superiority. Perhaps the most relationship-damaging form of criticism is public correction. I've watched countless relationships suffer because someone felt compelled to correct their partner, colleague, or friend in front of others. The person being corrected experiences not just the sting of criticism, but the humiliation of public embarrassment. This combination is often fatal to trust and connection. I remember attending a dinner party where a husband repeatedly corrected his wife's stories, pointing out inaccuracies and adding details she had forgotten. Each correction was factually correct, but I watched her enthusiasm drain away as the evening progressed. She became quieter and more withdrawn with each interruption. By the end of the night, she had stopped contributing to conversations entirely. The psychology behind criticism's destructive power is simple. It makes people feel diminished and defensive. When someone criticizes us, we instinctively protect ourselves by either fighting back or withdrawing. Neither response builds connection or trust. Instead, we begin to associate that person with feelings of inadequacy and discomfort. The alternative to criticism isn't ignoring problems or accepting poor performance. It's addressing issues in ways that preserve dignity and build understanding. Instead of pointing out what someone did wrong, focus on what you need or want. Instead of criticizing their approach, share your perspective without implying theirs is wrong. I learned to replace criticism with curiosity. Instead of telling someone they're wrong, I ask questions that help them discover better approaches on their own. Instead of pointing out flaws, I look for opportunities to acknowledge what they're doing well while gently suggesting improvements. The goal isn't to avoid all difficult conversations, but to have them in ways that strengthen rather than weaken relationships. When people feel safe from criticism in your presence, they're more likely to be open, honest, and vulnerable, the building blocks of genuine connection. I discovered early in my career that there's a profound difference between flattery and genuine appreciation, and mastering this distinction became one of my most powerful tools for building lasting connections. Flattery is cheap and transparent. Genuine appreciation is rare and magnetic. People instinctively sense the difference, and they're drawn to those who can truly see and acknowledge their worth. The art of making people feel important isn't about empty compliments or insincere praise. It's about developing the ability to recognize genuine value in others and expressing that recognition in meaningful ways. I developed what I called an importance amplifier, a mental framework for identifying and appreciating the unique contributions every person makes. One of my most memorable lessons in this art came from observing a janitor at a large corporation where I was teaching. Most executives and employees walked past him without acknowledgement, treating him as invisible furniture. But I noticed that he took tremendous pride in his work, arriving early to ensure everything was perfect and staying late to address any issues that arose. I began greeting him by name, asking about his work, and genuinely listening to his responses. I learned that he had developed innovative cleaning techniques that saved the company time and money. I discovered that he knew more about the building's operations than most of the managers. When I acknowledged his expertise and expressed appreciation for his dedication, his entire demeanor changed. He began going out of his way to help me, sharing insights about the company culture, and even recommending me for additional speaking opportunities. This experience taught me that everyone has something worth appreciating: skills they've developed, challenges they've overcome, perspectives they bring, or simply their inherent human dignity. The key is learning to see these qualities and express genuine appreciation for them. I've found that the most powerful appreciation focuses on specific behaviors, efforts, or qualities rather than general platitudes. Instead of saying "good job," I learnt to say, "I noticed how you took extra time to explain that concept to the new team member. Your patience and clear communication really made a difference." This specificity shows that you were paying attention, and that your appreciation is based on genuine observation. Another crucial element is appreciating effort and character, not just results. When someone works hard but doesn't achieve the desired outcome, acknowledging their effort and dedication can be more meaningful than praising someone's natural talent or lucky success. People remember who appreciated their struggles and growth, not just their victories. I also learned to appreciate people for qualities they might not even recognize in themselves. Sometimes pointing out someone's natural kindness, their reliability, or their ability to make others feel comfortable helps them see their own value more clearly. This type of appreciation creates deep gratitude because you're showing them something valuable about themselves. The timing of appreciation matters enormously. Public recognition amplifies its impact, but private appreciation often feels more sincere. I learned to look for opportunities to acknowledge people's contributions in front of their peers, superiors, or family members. When appropriate, this public validation can be incredibly powerful. However, the most important aspect of making people feel important is authenticity. People have finely tuned radar for insincerity. If you're offering appreciation to manipulate or gain something in return, they'll sense it and be repelled rather than attracted. Genuine appreciation must come from a place of authentic recognition and gratitude. I discovered that when you consistently make others feel important and valued, something remarkable happens. You become important to them. They begin to seek your opinion, value your presence, and go out of their way to help you succeed. By focusing on others' worth, you increase your own value in their eyes. The beautiful irony is that the more you focus on making others feel important, the more genuinely important you become in your community and relationships. I once collected before and after photographs of my students learning to smile genuinely, and the transformation was so dramatic that I could hardly believe the same person appeared in both images. The difference wasn't just in their facial expressions, it was in their entire presence, their energy, and the way people responded to them. A genuine smile, I discovered, is perhaps the most powerful tool for human connection ever developed. But here's what most people don't understand about smiling. There's a world of difference between a mechanical smile and a genuine one, and people can instantly detect the difference. A forced smile involves only the mouth muscles and often looks strained or uncomfortable. A genuine smile, what psychologists call a Duchenne smile, engages the entire face, including the muscles around the eyes, and radiates authentic warmth. I learned about the power of genuine smiling through my own painful experience with forced expressions. In my early days of teaching, I believed that smiling was simply a technique to appear friendly. I would practice smiling in the mirror, forcing my mouth into what I thought was an appealing expression. But students would often comment that I seemed nervous or insincere, and I couldn't understand why my friendly demeanor wasn't working. The breakthrough came when I realized that a genuine smile must start from the inside. It can't be manufactured or faked. It must arise from authentic positive feelings toward the person you're with. When I shifted my focus from trying to appear friendly to actually feeling friendly, my smile transformed completely. Students began responding to me with much greater warmth and openness. I started paying close attention to what created genuine, positive feelings in me during interactions with others. I discovered that when I approached each person with curiosity about their experiences, appreciation for their unique qualities, and genuine interest in their well-being, warm feelings arose naturally. These feelings then expressed themselves through authentic smiles that people found irresistible. The science behind smiling's power is fascinating. When someone sees a genuine smile, mirror neurons in their brain automatically trigger positive feelings in response. It's as if your smile actually creates happiness in the other person's nervous system. They begin to associate you with good feelings before you even speak. But beyond the immediate neurological response, a genuine smile communicates several powerful messages simultaneously. It says, "I'm glad to see you, I'm not a threat, I'm approachable, and I find you worthy of my positive attention." These messages are received subconsciously but influence how people feel about interacting with you. I've observed that people who smile genuinely tend to receive better service, more cooperation, and greater forgiveness when they make mistakes. Servers are more attentive, colleagues are more helpful, and strangers are more willing to assist them. The smile creates a positive feedback loop where others' positive responses reinforce the smiler's own positive feelings. However, timing and appropriateness matter enormously. A smile that's inappropriate for the situation can seem tone-deaf or insensitive. I learned to match my facial expressions to the emotional context of the conversation while still maintaining an underlying warmth and openness. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that developing the ability to smile genuinely requires cultivating genuine positive feelings toward others. This means looking for things to appreciate in every person you meet, approaching interactions with curiosity rather than judgment, and developing a general sense of goodwill toward humanity. The smile that opens every door isn't a technique or a strategy, it's the natural expression of a heart that has learned to find genuine joy in connecting with others. When you develop this capacity for authentic warmth, your smile becomes a magnetic force that draws people toward you rather than causing them to pull away. I developed an intricate index card system to remember the names and personal details of every student I taught. And this simple practice transformed my relationships more dramatically than any other technique I ever learnt. A person's name, I discovered, is to them the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Yet most people treat names carelessly, forgetting them immediately and thereby missing one of the most powerful opportunities to create instant connection. The revelation about names came to me during my second year of teaching, when I had grown from a handful of students to classes of 50 or more. I noticed that students whose names I remembered consistently participated more actively, showed greater enthusiasm, and developed stronger loyalty to the program. Meanwhile, students whose names I struggled with seemed more distant and less engaged. I decided to conduct an experiment. I began using my index card system religiously, writing down not just names but personal details, their profession, hometown, family situation, hobbies, and goals. Before each class, I would review these cards, refreshing my memory about each individual. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Students began arriving early to chat with me personally. They brought friends to classes. They recommended my programs to colleagues. Most significantly, they would light up whenever I greeted them by name and asked about specific details from their lives. How did that presentation go at your company? Or did your daughter enjoy her first week at college? These simple questions, made possible by remembering their names and details, created profound bonds. I realized that remembering someone's name does much more than prevent embarrassment. It communicates that they matter enough to you to occupy space in your memory. In a world where most people are forgotten the moment after introductions, the person who remembers your name stands out as someone who truly sees and values you. The psychology behind this is powerful. Our names are intimately connected to our identity and sense of self. When someone uses our name, especially in a warm and personal way, it triggers a positive response in our brain. We feel recognized, valued, and important. Conversely, when someone forgets our name or consistently gets it wrong, we feel diminished and unimportant. I've watched people's entire demeanor change when someone they'd met briefly months earlier greeted them by name. Their faces light up, their posture straightens, and they immediately become more animated and friendly. They feel like they've made a real connection with someone who cares enough to remember them. The challenge, of course, is that most people are terrible at remembering names. They're introduced to someone, immediately forget the name, and then spend the rest of the interaction hoping they won't need to use it. This creates awkwardness and distance rather than connection. I developed several techniques for name retention that anyone can use. First, I repeat the name immediately during the introduction. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Then I use it several times during our first conversation. Sarah, what brings you to this event? Finally, I write it down as soon as possible with any distinguishing details that will help me remember both the name and the person. But beyond the mechanics of memory, the real key is caring enough about people to make the effort. When you truly value others as individuals worth knowing, remembering, their names becomes a natural expression of that value. The index card system was just a tool. The real transformation came from developing genuine interest in each person I met. The impact extends far beyond initial meetings. Using someone's name throughout ongoing relationships maintains that sense of personal connection and recognition. It's the difference between generic interaction and personal relationship. Asterisk. One of my most treasured possessions is a small pin shaped like ears that a grateful student gave me after she transformed her marriage by learning to truly listen. She told me that learning to listen, really listen, had saved not just her relationship, but her entire approach to human connection. That pin became my daily reminder of perhaps the most undervalued and powerful skill in human relations: the art of genuine listening. Most people think they know how to listen, but what they're actually doing is waiting for their turn to speak. They're not processing what the other person is saying. They're formulating their response, planning their rebuttal, or thinking about their own related experiences. This pseudo-listening is not only ineffective, it's actively repelling because people can sense when they're not truly being heard. I learned about real listening the hard way, through a painful experience with my own father. During one of his visits, he began telling me about the challenges he was facing on the farm, crop failures, financial pressures, and health concerns. Instead of listening to understand his experience, I immediately jumped into problem-solving mode, offering advice about farm management, financial planning, and medical resources. I noticed his enthusiasm waning as I spoke, but I pressed on, convinced that my solutions were exactly what he needed. By the end of our conversation, he had grown quiet and withdrawn. He never brought up his problems with me again, and I later learned he had found comfort and support by talking with neighbors who simply listened without trying to fix everything. That experience taught me the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. When we listen to respond, we're focused on what we're going to say next. When we listen to understand, we're focused on truly grasping the other person's experience, feelings, and perspective. Genuine listening requires what I call full presence, giving someone your complete, undivided attention. This means putting away distractions, making eye contact, and focusing entirely on what they're sharing. Most people are so starved for this kind of attention that when they receive it, they're immediately drawn to the person providing it. But true listening goes beyond just paying attention. It involves what I call listening between the lines, hearing not just the words being spoken, but the emotions, needs, and concerns underlying them. When someone tells you about a frustrating day at work, they might not be looking for solutions. They might simply need to feel heard and understood. I developed a technique I call reflective listening, where I would occasionally summarize what I heard to ensure I understood correctly. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by all these competing demands on your time. This simple reflection serves two purposes. It confirms that I'm understanding accurately, and it demonstrates that I'm truly paying attention to their experience. The power of genuine listening lies in its rarity. In a world where everyone is competing for attention and trying to get their own thoughts heard, the person who listens with genuine interest stands out dramatically. People begin to seek out these rare listeners because being heard and understood is such a fundamental human need. I've observed that skilled listeners develop a magnetic quality that draws others to them. People share more openly, trust more readily, and feel more connected to those who demonstrate the ability to truly hear them. These listeners become confidants, advisors, and valued friends not because of what they say, but because of how well they listen. The irony is that by talking less and listening more, you become more interesting and influential. People remember those who made them feel heard far more than those who impressed them with clever words or extensive knowledge. When you master the art of genuine listening, you give people something precious and rare, the experience of being truly understood. This gift creates bonds that draw people toward you rather than pushing them away. I developed what I called a conflict resolution template after watching countless relationships deteriorate because people felt compelled to argue and prove themselves right. This template became one of my most requested tools because it transformed potentially destructive disagreements into opportunities for deeper connection. The secret lies in building what I call an agreement bridge, finding common ground before addressing differences. The revelation came to me during a heated debate at a professional conference. Two respected speakers were arguing about teaching methodologies, each becoming more entrenched in their position as the discussion continued. I watched their body language become increasingly defensive, their voices rise, and their respect for each other visibly diminish. Neither was listening to the other. Both were simply waiting for openings to attack the opposing viewpoint. I realized that arguing, even when you're absolutely right, accomplishes nothing except pushing the other person further away from your position. When people feel attacked or criticized, they don't think rationally about the merit of your arguments. They think defensively about protecting their ego and position. This insight led me to develop a completely different approach to disagreements. Instead of immediately presenting my opposing view, I learned to first find something I could genuinely agree with in the other person's position. This wasn't about being dishonest or manipulative. It was about acknowledging the valid elements in their perspective before introducing my own. I had an opportunity to test this approach during a disagreement with a fellow instructor about classroom management techniques. Instead of immediately explaining why his approach was flawed, I began by saying, "You're absolutely right that maintaining student engagement is crucial, and I appreciate how much thought you've put into creating an interactive environment." This acknowledgement completely changed the dynamic of our conversation. Instead of becoming defensive, he relaxed and became curious about my perspective. We ended up having a productive discussion that improved both of our teaching methods, and our professional relationship grew stronger. Rather than being damaged by the disagreement, the agreement bridge works because it satisfies the human ego's need to be right before challenging it to consider alternatives. When people feel that their intelligence and good intentions are recognized, they become much more open to hearing different viewpoints. They stop feeling like they need to defend themselves and start genuinely considering what you're sharing. I learned to look for common ground in several areas: shared goals, underlying values, valid concerns, or good intentions. Even in heated disagreements, there's almost always something both parties care about, or some aspect of the situation they can agree upon. Starting with these points of agreement creates a foundation for constructive dialogue. The language of agreement is crucial. Phrases like "you're absolutely right about ... or "I completely agree that ... or "you make an excellent point when you say," create psychological safety for the other person. They feel heard and validated rather than attacked and dismissed. Once the agreement bridge is established, disagreements can be introduced as additions rather than contradictions. And I'd like to add another perspective to consider, ... or "building on what you've said, I found that ... This approach frames differences as collaborative exploration rather than adversarial debate. I've watched this technique transform family arguments, business negotiations, and professional disagreements. Instead of creating winners and losers, it creates mutual understanding and often leads to solutions neither party had considered initially. The most powerful aspect of the agreement bridge is that it demonstrates respect for the other person's intelligence and good intentions. Even when you disagree with their conclusions, you're acknowledging their capacity for sound reasoning and positive motivation. This respect is returned and creates a foundation for ongoing positive relationships. People remember how you made them feel during disagreements far more than they remember who was right or wrong. When you use the agreement bridge, they remember feeling respected and heard, which draws them toward future interactions with you rather than avoiding potential conflicts. Asterisk, I kept a daily energy journal throughout my career, tracking my enthusiasm levels and their direct correlation with how people responded to me. What I discovered was remarkable. Enthusiasm is perhaps the most contagious emotion in human relations. When you approach others with genuine excitement and positive energy, they can't help but be drawn into that emotional state. Conversely, low energy and indifference create an invisible barrier that pushes people away. The power of enthusiasm became clear to me during my early teaching days when I was struggling with small class sizes and lukewarm student engagement. I was competent, well-prepared and knowledgeable, but my delivery was flat and uninspiring. Students attended but didn't seem excited about the material or eager to return. Everything changed the day I decided to approach my class with genuine excitement about what I was teaching. Instead of simply presenting information, I shared my own fascination with the principles of human relations. I spoke with energy about how these concepts had transformed my own life and could transform theirs. I expressed authentic enthusiasm for their potential success. The response was immediate and dramatic. Students sat up straighter, asked more questions, and stayed after class to continue discussions. Word of mouth about my classes improved, enrollment increased, and student success rates soared. The only difference was my level of enthusiasm for the subject and for their success. I realized that enthusiasm communicates several powerful messages simultaneously. It shows that you believe in what you're doing, that you find value in the interaction, and that you're genuinely excited to be with that person or group. People are naturally drawn to those who approach life with positive energy, because that energy lifts their own spirits. But here's the crucial distinction I learned. There's a world of difference between genuine enthusiasm and forced excitement. Artificial enthusiasm feels hollow and manipulative. People can immediately sense when someone is faking energy or trying to manufacture excitement. True enthusiasm must come from authentic, positive feelings about the situation, the people, or the possibilities ahead. I developed what I called enthusiasm cultivation, the practice of finding genuine reasons to be excited about each interaction. Before meeting with someone, I would focus on what I could learn from them, how I might help them, or what positive outcomes might result from our time together. This mental preparation created authentic enthusiasm that people found irresistible. The energy journal revealed fascinating patterns. On days when I felt genuinely enthusiastic, people were more responsive, conversations flowed more easily, and opportunities seemed to appear spontaneously. On days when my energy was low, interactions felt forced, people seemed distant, and even routine activities became more difficult. Enthusiasm also has a multiplying effect. When you approach someone with genuine excitement, they typically respond with increased energy of their own. This creates an upward spiral where both parties feel more engaged, more creative, and more connected. These are the interactions people remember fondly and want to repeat. I learned that enthusiasm must be appropriate to the situation. Excessive energy in serious or sensitive contexts can seem insensitive or tone-deaf. The key is matching your enthusiasm to the moment while maintaining an underlying current of positive energy and engagement. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that enthusiasm for others' success creates the strongest magnetic effect. When people sense that you're genuinely excited about their achievements, their goals, and their potential, they're naturally drawn to your supportive energy. They begin to associate you with feelings of possibility and encouragement. The enthusiasm magnet works because it makes people feel more alive and hopeful in your presence. In a world full of cynicism and negativity, those who bring authentic, positive energy become beacons that others naturally gravitate toward. I collected stories of leaders who won loyalty by showing their human side, and these accounts taught me one of the most counterintuitive principles of human relations. Carefully chosen vulnerability creates trust and connection, while attempts at perfection push people away. Most people believe they need to appear flawless to be respected and liked. But I discovered that appropriate openness about struggles and imperfections actually makes you more relatable and trustworthy. This lesson came to me through a painful but transformative experience early in my career. I was scheduled to give an important presentation to a group of business leaders, and I had prepared meticulously to appear knowledgeable and confident. However, on the morning of the presentation, I received devastating news about a family crisis that left me emotionally shaken. I had two choices: cancel the presentation or proceed while pretending everything was fine. I chose a third option that would change my understanding of human connection forever. I began my presentation by briefly acknowledging that I was dealing with a personal challenge and might not be at my usual energy level, but that I was committed to delivering value despite the circumstances. The response shocked me. Instead of losing respect for my apparent weakness, the audience became more engaged and supportive. They listened more intently, asked more thoughtful questions, and several approached me afterward to share their own similar experiences and offer encouragement. My vulnerability had created a bridge of shared humanity that purely professional competence never could have built. This experience taught me that perfection is intimidating and isolating, while appropriate vulnerability is magnetic and connecting. When we present ourselves as having it all figured out, we inadvertently create distance between ourselves and others who are struggling with their own challenges and imperfections. However, I learned that vulnerability must be strategic and appropriate. Oversharing personal problems or constantly dwelling on difficulties can push people away just as effectively as rigid perfection. The key is sharing enough humanity to create connection without burdening others with excessive personal drama. Effective vulnerability involves sharing struggles you've overcome, rather than current crises you're drowning in. It means admitting when you don't know something, rather than pretending expertise you don't possess. It involves acknowledging mistakes and showing how you learned from them rather than trying to cover up all evidence of failure. I began incorporating appropriate vulnerability into my teaching by sharing stories of my own social awkwardness and the mistakes I made while learning to connect with others. Students responded with relief and increased engagement because they realized I understood their struggles firsthand. My willingness to admit my own journey from social failure to success made my teaching more credible and my person more approachable. The psychology behind vulnerability's power is fascinating. When someone shares appropriate struggles or admits uncertainty, it triggers our protective and nurturing instincts. We feel safer being imperfect around someone who has shown their own imperfections. We trust more readily those who demonstrate the courage to be genuine rather than polished. I noticed that leaders who shared appropriate challenges and learning experiences inspired greater loyalty than those who maintained facades of constant success. Team members felt more comfortable bringing problems forward when they knew their leader had faced similar struggles. Colleagues offered more genuine support when they sensed authentic humanity rather than intimidating perfection. The vulnerability secret works because it demonstrates strength rather than weakness. It takes courage to show your humanity, wisdom, to admit your limitations, and confidence to be genuine rather than perfect. People are drawn to this authentic strength because it gives them permission to be human to dot. When you master appropriate vulnerability, you create psychological safety that draws people toward deeper connection rather than pushing them away through intimidating perfection. I maintained a service ledger throughout my career, detailed record of favors, assistance, and support I provided to others without any expectation of return. What this ledger revealed over time was perhaps the most powerful principle in human relations. When you approach relationships with a giving-first mindset, you become someone people naturally want to help, support, and include in opportunities. The service mindset transformed my life, but it didn't come naturally to me. Like most people, I initially approached relationships with a subtle focus on what I could gain connections that might advance my career, people who could provide opportunities, or individuals who possessed knowledge or resources I needed. This approach yielded mediocre results and shallow relationships. The shift occurred when I met a successful businessman named Henry who seemed to know everyone and be universally respected and liked. I was curious about his secret, so I observed him carefully at networking events and social gatherings. What I noticed was remarkable. He spent his time looking for ways to help others, rather than promoting himself or seeking assistance. I watched Henry introduce people who could benefit from knowing each other, recommend services and resources to those who needed them, and offer his expertise freely to anyone who could use it. He remembered people's challenges and followed up with potential solutions. He celebrated others' successes and offered support during their difficulties. Most remarkably, Henry never seemed to ask for anything for himself, yet opportunities flowed to him constantly. People brought him business proposals, invited him to exclusive events, and sought his advice on important decisions. By focusing entirely on serving others, he had created a network of people who naturally wanted to serve him in return. I decided to adopt Henry's approach as an experiment. Instead of attending events to promote my teaching services, I focused on learning about others' challenges and looking for ways to assist them. Instead of trying to impress people with my expertise, I looked for opportunities to share knowledge that would benefit them. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. As I developed a reputation for being helpful rather than people began seeking me out. They shared opportunities with me before advertising them publicly. They recommended my services to their colleagues and invited me to participate in projects and events. We learned that the service mindset works because it reverses the typical dynamic of human relations. Instead of asking, "What can this person do for me?" you ask, "What can I do for this person?" This shift changes everything about how you interact and how others perceive you. People can sense the difference between those who are trying to extract value from relationships and those who are genuinely interested in adding value. We're naturally drawn to those who make us feel supported and appreciated, while we instinctively avoid those who seem to see us primarily as means to their own ends. The service mindset doesn't mean being a doormat or giving away everything for free. It means leading with generosity and helpfulness while maintaining appropriate boundaries. It's about looking for ways to contribute before looking for ways to benefit. I discovered that service creates what I call relationship capital, a reservoir of goodwill that naturally generates opportunities and support over time. When you've consistently helped others, they want to help you when the opportunity arises. When you've been generous with your time and expertise, others become generous with theirs. The compound effect of service is remarkable. Each act of genuine helpfulness creates positive feelings and gratitude that people remember. Over time, you become associated with positive experiences and beneficial outcomes in many people's minds. This reputation draws opportunities, connections, and support that would be impossible to achieve through self-promotion alone. Perhaps, most importantly, the service mindset creates genuine satisfaction and fulfillment. When your relationships are built on mutual benefit and shared success, they become sources of joy rather than stress. You develop a network of people who genuinely care about your well-being because you've demonstrated genuine care for theirs. I developed a student success tracker after years of observing which practices created the fastest and most lasting transformation in people's ability to attract rather than repel others. What I discovered was that consistent daily application of these principles, tracked carefully over 30 days, could completely transform someone's social magnetism and relationship success. The transformation plan I'm about to share with you has been tested by thousands of my students over the decades. Those who followed it diligently for 30 consecutive days reported dramatic improvements in their relationships, their professional opportunities, and their overall satisfaction with social interactions. Week 1. Foundation building. Your first week focuses on breaking the habits that push people away. Each day, choose one repelling behavior to eliminate completely. Day 1. Commit to making no conversation about yourself unless directly asked. Day 2. Eliminate all criticism and correction of others. Day 3. Put away all distractions during conversations. Day 4. Stop interrupting or finishing other sentences. During this first week, also begin the daily practice of genuine appreciation. Find one specific thing to acknowledge in each person you interact with: their effort, their thoughtfulness, their skill, or simply their inherent worth as a human being. Write these acknowledgements in a small notebook to track your progress. Week 2. Active connection skills. Week 2 introduces the practices that actively draw people toward you. Begin each day by setting an intention to make every person you encounter feel genuinely important. Practice remembering and using names in every interaction. Start asking questions that show real interest in others' experiences and perspectives. Implement the listening challenge in every conversation. Aim to listen for twice as long as you speak. Practice reflective listening by occasionally summarizing what you've heard to ensure understanding. Notice how people respond when they feel truly heard and understood. Week 3. Advanced relationship building. Week 3 focuses on the subtle skills that create deep connection. Practice finding genuine common ground before expressing any disagreement. Work on matching your enthusiasm level appropriately to each situation while maintaining underlying positive energy. Begin sharing appropriate vulnerability. Admit when you don't know something. Acknowledge past mistakes you've learned from, and show your humanity without oversharing. Notice how this openness affects the quality of your connections. Week 4. Service and integration. Your final week integrates all principles while adding the service mindset. Look for one way to help each person you interact with, whether through information, connections, or simple acts of consideration. Keep track of these service opportunities in your notebook. Practice the complete approach. Greet people warmly. Use their names. Show genuine interest. Listen actively. Find common ground. Express appropriate enthusiasm, and look for ways to serve. Notice how this comprehensive approach transforms your interactions. Daily tracking methods. Use a simple rating system to track your progress. Each evening, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in these areas. Listening quality, genuine interest shown, appropriate enthusiasm, service opportunities taken, and overall connection success. Also note specific positive responses you observed from others. Overcoming setbacks, expect resistance, both from yourself and occasionally from others who are accustomed to your old patterns. Some people may be suspicious of sudden changes in your behavior. Stay consistent and authentic. Focus on genuine internal shifts rather than surface-level technique application. When you slip back into old habits, don't abandon the entire effort. Simply restart the next day with renewed commitment. Transformation is a process, not a perfect linear progression. Measuring success for 30 days, you should notice several clear indicators of transformation. People seeking you out for conversation. Increased invitations to social and professional events. Colleagues sharing information and opportunities with you more freely. And a general sense that others enjoy your company rather than avoiding it. The most important measurement, however, is your own sense of satisfaction and ease in social situations. when you've truly internalized these principles. Connecting with others becomes natural and enjoyable rather than stressful and forced. Remember that this 30-day plan is just the beginning. These principles become most powerful when they become habitual parts of your personality rather than conscious techniques you apply. Continue practicing until drawing people toward you becomes as natural as breathing. As I prepared for my final public speaking class, I wrote notes that I've kept all these years, thoughts about the ripple effect of human connection and the legacy we create through our relationships with others. These final teaching notes remind me that when you transform from someone people avoid into someone they seek out, you don't just change your own life, you change the lives of everyone you touch. I've witnessed this transformation countless times over my career, and the pattern is always the same. When someone learns to genuinely connect with others, to make them feel important and valued, something magical happens. That person becomes a catalyst for positive change in every relationship and interaction they have. Think about the people in your own life who have this magnetic quality, those individuals who make you feel better about yourself simply by being in their presence. Notice how their influence extends far beyond your direct interactions with them. They inspire you to be kinder to others, more patient with difficulties, and more optimistic about human nature in general. This is the legacy of connection. When you become someone who draws people in rather than pushing them away, you create a ripple effect of positive human relations that extends far beyond what you can see or measure. The colleague you make feel valued goes home and treats their family with greater warmth. The stranger you acknowledge with genuine interest carries that positive energy into their next interaction. Your transformation matters not just for your own relationships and opportunities, but for the countless people who will benefit from your newfound ability to see and appreciate their worth. In a world where so many people feel invisible and unimportant, becoming someone who makes others feel seen and valued is one of the greatest gifts you can give to humanity. I have learned that people remember how you made them feel long after they forget what you said or did. When you master the art of human connection, you become part of people's positive memories and associations. You become someone whose presence adds light and warmth to the world rather than coldness and distance. The principles I have shared with you today are not merely techniques for getting what you want from others. They are ways of being that honor the dignity and worth of every person you encounter. When you approach relationships with genuine interest, authentic appreciation, and sincere desire to serve others' well-being, you contribute to the fundamental human need for connection and belonging. As you begin to apply these principles, remember that the goal is not to become perfect, but to become genuine. People are drawn to authenticity, not perfection. They want to connect with real human beings who acknowledge their own struggles while still maintaining hope and positive energy. The world needs more people who know how to build bridges instead of walls, who can find common ground instead of emphasizing differences, and who approach others with curiosity and appreciation rather than judgment and indifference. You have the power to become one of these people. Start today with the very next person you encounter. Look for something genuine to appreciate about them. Listen to understand rather than to respond. Make them feel, even for a moment, that they matter and that their thoughts and experiences are valuable. This is how you transform from someone people avoid into someone they seek out, not through manipulation or technique, but through genuine care for the human beings around you. This is how you create a legacy of connection that will outlast any specific achievement or accomplishment. The choice is yours. You can continue patterns that push people away, or you can embrace practices that draw them toward you. Choose connection. Choose to see and value others. Choose to become a source of light in a world that often feels dark and disconnected. Your journey toward magnetic human relations begins with your very next interaction.